Hello?
Hey, how are you guys?
How are you?
Doing okay?
Good.
Hello.
Hi.
So I think we finished the let me do this. We finished, I guess, 11 or 10 last time. Is that right? And now we just have this one, it's the finished one.
Yeah.
The notes said we had like a page left of the last chapter, but I didn't have any thoughts.
Yeah, there's a bunch of monkey paw stuff. I don't know what it is. Yeah. The hour is very late. Very all along the Watchtower lives. But choice to go to Elon knocks at our door. I really wonder what he would say now. But yeah, I guess we can just dive into this if there's no one else and no other comments for that. But yeah, if you want to dive into it, you can. Or any other thoughts before we begin?
Yeah, so this chapter was pretty short, and it definitely felt like a concluding chapter. Like, he revisited the idea of like these two. Well, first he like introduces what he's going to talk about by talking about von Neumann's games. Well, he mentions von Neumann, but there's not much explanation there. I can't remember if he explained that in a previous chapter. But he's talking about how communication is, it requires cooperation between the speaker and the listener, and there are things that can jam the signal. There are jamming forces, and he uses that general point to set up like one way of viewing the scientific method as this kind of communication between man and nature. It involves possible jamming forces, but ultimately requires like a cooperation. Oh yeah, the problem of induction stuff is kind of one of the last things he talks about. If we wanted to keep the notes like chronological, I don't care. Yeah, so science doing science requires a certain kind of personality almost. He says there are certain personalities or attitudes that can disqualify a man from being a scientist. He says men who suspect nature of disingenuousness, or who are disingenuous in his attitude to nature and to questions about nature, are unfit to be scientists. Saying like someone who's maybe more fit to be a detective, to be like skeptical and like distrustful. That's not a good personality for a scientist. Which is like, I think what he ends up saying is true when he like gets into the faith stuff, but I also think that there's a certain kind of suspicion that would make a good scientist.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting things that kind of be said about I think there's a lot of different things to be said about his take on faith and like how he's viewing what that is and everything else.
I can't figure out what he means by suspicious. I mean, I guess one could argue that if you view nature as an anthropomorphic thing, you're probably disqualified from science. But, so I guess, one might argue if you view nature as an anthropomorphic thing, that disqualifies you from being a scientist. I don't know. But I don't know what he means by skeptical. Like, there are different types of sort of scientific inquiry. I mean, some of that is skeptical of, like, the current dogma, and then sometimes that leads you down the road to like vaccine denial, and other times that leads you down the road to like finding a new discovery. So I don't know exactly what he's getting at there.
I think that the context of like these two types of demons helps explain makes it clear what he means. So there's not like any I don't know. It's not like nature is working against you. So
Okay.
that's if you have an attitude where you think something about nature is working against you or against man, then then that's not a very scientific orientation to have towards the world.
I guess, except that like it kind of, if you're like fighting, like if you're inventing pasteurization or if you're like developing a vaccine, maybe that is your worldview, and in the sense that you defeated nature in that way. You know, I don't know.
Is it? And this is this is an uninformed question, but like, do you see Norbert as basically in this part? Like, I feel like he's obviously trying to make some kind of a moral stand, or like he's advocating for something, and I feel like there's an element of like when he talks about science, he talks a little bit about it in the sense of you should have faith, but does he basically mean like faith in people, like in faith in meaning, like is it related to his talk about like meaning and entropy and stuff like that? How does that square with things?
It could be. So I don't know if I told the story about like the people who studied thermodynamics. Like when we first started studying thermodynamics, like 2 or 3 of the people killed themselves because they couldn't come to terms with like that, you know, there was heat death in the universe and everything would end in heat death. So like, you know, yeah, so I don't, maybe that in that sense, if you don't have faith in something and then you just view the universe as all about entropy, that's probably not good.
This one, I don't remember which one it's from, but like this quote: "We're swimming upstream against a great torrent of disorganization. Our main obligation is to establish unpleasant order. It's not defeatism, but declaration of our own, nature, and attempt to build up unpleasant organization in the face of nature's own blah blah blah." And like there's all this depends on where you kind of cut out the dot 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 parts of this, but like I feel like Norbert's saying, and even to an extent, this whole like the conclusion of this, which is based on this page, but you know, like you gotta have faith that meaning matters. Otherwise, if you are kind of lost in the nihilism and the negative view, then you can't really. And I wonder if that's kind of what he's trying to get with the inductors and stuff. Like you kind of have to have if you're going to meaningfully do science, or I guess that's what he calls science. There's sort of this element of you have to kind of believe that there's something moving forward that's worth it, as opposed to just it just doesn't matter anyway because of heat death and so on. Like just mass entropy nothing matters. Like I think he's kind of indirectly challenging that as being part of it.
Yeah, at one point he explicitly says what the scientist needs to have faith in is the law-like nature of nature.
I saw that somewhere too.
And that's kind of his solution to the problem of induction. Which I liked because it admits that like it is a real problem. He's like taking it seriously. Other philosophers maybe don't so much.
I would love to have the discussion with him that I'm kind of pointing out recently in terms of the science. Like all my junk about science and what happened in the scientific revolution and all that stuff. But yeah, it's sort of like this. I think he's trying to be balanced by saying the Alice in Wonderland comparison is a little bit of a like there's a certain amount of belief you have to have in science, and you also have to be open to the fact that everything could change. There's only so much kind of it reminds me of the article what was it called, Norbert and the something like this. Yeah, wow, I pulled this one out of long ago. Never Waiter, the counter tradition to the dream of mastery. Do you remember this one, Brian?
I do, yes, I do remember this.
But it's sort of like, so this is kind of like big time precursor to the Methodist Project, big time precursor to like maybe kind of in the What Happens to Cybernetics era, but basically it's sort of this the uncertainty of Norbert Weiner. Like he is very, a lot of this I find like commentary on the uncertainty and like kind of this sense of dealing with the uncertainty. Like you have to be bought into the uncertainty and like the rigorous investigation of what science can do, while at the same time not going overboard into the apathy. And I think he's basically, I don't know if he explicitly said this here or not, but kind of alludes to or implies that if you go too far off the mark and into apathy, or maybe not overt apathy, but you can turn into this sort of
misanthrope.
What's that?
Misanthrope.
Yeah, you can take a left wing view or a right wing view of that, and he's saying either way, either extremism to that end is not let's say not ideal, I guess. But yeah, I guess I'll look at this one to try to find something specific again.
No, I think he makes a sort of a fallacy here, which is that if you're, that there is this sort of need for, I don't know what he calls hope, I guess it's purpose or something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if you don't have that purpose, that there's nothing there. I mean, it's kind of an assumption he's making here. I don't exactly know what he's getting at. I mean, a lot of people have faith in their very, a lot of people have faith and are very, like, poor, have poor ethics, let's just say. So I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like, I wonder how much this has changed from the first version too. Like, I wonder how much of this language is like what Norbert thinks. I would love to be able to compare what does Norbert think in 1950s language. What does Norbert think in 2023 language? What does Norbert think in terms of Cold War, in terms of like, you can't really be writing books about how great it is to be atheist right now because that's godless communism, And then you don't want to sound like a religious zealot either. So I wonder what he really means, and I don't know from this passage in that sense for sure. And I don't even know which of Einstein's dictums on the directness of God. I don't know which one.
I'm not familiar with that.
I know there's the God doesn't roll dice thing. Yeah. I think that's Einstein, right?
It's he quotes it on the top of 188. God may be subtle, but he isn't plain mean. when talking about the two types of demons. Or it's a little before that, talking about the jamming forces in communication.
So I don't know what's this point in this chapter, like, and jam. I guess he's trying to talk about what is jam to Norbert. Let's ask that question.
Well, I think if we look at like, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I think you can look at the von Neumann theory of games and the way kind of he's thinking about that. So von Neumann, I guess, I think it's von Neumann who proposed the game against nature, which is it's like a one-player game. You have an agent, and it's playing against a set of stochastic strategies. And the stochastic strategies are generated just sort of random, and the player one is trying to predict the moves of that stochastic strategy. So you can think about that as like scientific inquiry, because you have basically no knowledge of the stochastic process, and you have to kind of figure out a move to win. And if it's truly stochastic, then you can't win because it's hard to predict a stochastic process 100% of the time. But then if there are patterns in it, if it's not truly stochastic, and there are laws in there, that you can find, then you can figure out a pattern and win. So that would be like finding like a vaccine against a disease, or some sort of, cure against a disease. And so we can say that, you can triumph in science by learning the rules or the patterns or the law-like behavior of nature. And so you win that round. And so, you can think about that in terms of the game. And then the jamming aspect is, what is the noise in that channel? So if you're observing it with perfect resolution, the player is playing and always getting the signal from nature that is not corrupted by some noise, then how likely are they to find the pattern? I guess that would be what he's talking about jamming, which is where, you would have like some noise in the channel. It would be impossible to know if something has any structure, or if you're just picking up on noise and the stochastic aspect of it. I guess that's what that's one way to put this in terms of von Neumann game theory.
Would you want to say more, Randy?
Yeah, I think just maybe more metaphorically, some of the doing forces that he's referencing are like just these other forces that get in the way of doing good science. So when he starts talking about propaganda, and when a person is like has an allegiance to an ideology that comes before like I forget exactly what he says, but if like these features that would make someone not the best scientist, like adherence to a particular belief system and a closed-mindedness to things that would require you change that belief system. So just like also more generally, those are maybe a little more metaphorically, that's noise in the channel of communication between man and nature. It's like science in practice involves these other forces.
Of course, man is an archaic term. Like, don't use man anymore. So it's kind of like person.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's in cybernetics book, but like what Norbert calls anti-homeostatic stuff, like news media and propaganda as these anti-homeostatic qualities, or like anti-homeostatic influences on things. And I think it's, I don't know if fun's the right word, but it's fun and challenging to think about. If Norbert, we're here now, what do we say? Like you have propaganda on steroids and on demand, and you can now we're really close. I think it was like the Terminator movie, The Running Man, right? Where it was sort of this futuristic take on the game show, kind of like Hunger Games sort of things. And one of the technologists from that movie, they were like, oh, they totally nailed the prediction of, as that part of the Running Man is like they basically deep faked or had they made Arnold's character look like, not the Terminator, but the Running Man, made this character look like, oh, he committed this act of terror. He drove the pilot, he drove the helicopter into the ground and like told the order to kill all the people or whatever, and they made that fake image the thing the public saw, as opposed to what actually happened. Arnold's of course the hero, and it's sort of like even just the rapidity of those technologies happening and those becoming more and more the thing. And I don't think we've really, at least as far as my knowledge, we haven't had there hasn't been a President Biden shown as giving the secret handshake with Putin about their deal, and like that hasn't been made propaganda yet. But just those technologies and where we are now, how it it's almost like there's an element. As much as I'm a Norbert Wiener fanboy, for life. There's parts of the argument that feel very trapped, prisoner of the moment, and I feel like a lot of the arguments he's making are the right thing to say at the time. And now, I think it's fair to say all of us here, and most people that be watching this, have grown up. At least I would say, like if there was any reservations about being able to stem the tide from these things happening, the tide was not stemmed. Like we're in an era where you have to filter out against massive propaganda and noise all the time. Like it's not even a will it be a thing. It's like no, like it's always there. And as a bit of a nod to my like person studies psychology, cognition, future stuff, like not only is the propaganda there, the very best insights that have been gleaned from psychological studies are now turned upon you as a hapless bystander getting an advertisement thrown at you. Like it's the attention warfare is not passive or subtle. It is subtle sometimes, and it is passive seeming, but it's never like, if you want to talk about the different kind of devils, that we're dealing with, there's a devil that's like coming after you and using the best insights for whatever the cognitive science have or have not done, where you can bet that, Cambridge Analytica and Verizon and let's insert big company name here is pimping them as hard as possible at your expense, and they're not interested in your well-being at all. And soapbox aside, I feel like there's a little bit of. I think Norbert was sort of being the man or the old man shaking his fist at things, to at least try to make the stand about it. And I wonder how it squares with the world that we're in now.
Yeah.
I still think his implications were like, there's a certain, in a way that I do feel a little outdated, but like there's sort of a lineage of like Carl Sagan's take on science and like the way of science as I think it's like the title and subtitle of the book, A Demon Haunted World, Science as like a candle in the light, or science as a way of doing stuff. And I feel like it's really interesting now to be in this era where I'm kind of interested in critiquing some parts of science as a method for doing things, but also like, science in the 20th century is this attempt at making progress in certain areas, and it definitely has. But we're kind of in this space of I don't know. We're in a post-Cold War world. We're in a world that's like the apathy. I wonder what Norbert would argue against apathy now. Like apathy is different now. Apathy isn't godless communism necessarily, or like the Cold War context is past, and now it's sort of this, I don't know, modernist, whatever's after postmodernism. I don't really know. Like there's sort of the internet,
Yeah.
the internet age here. You're saying, sorry.
People have proposed something like metamodernism. I don't know if I don't exactly know too much about, but I've heard people say it, but then I've never understood what they're talking about. So
there's the thing that one, I guess, a critique and a love note, I don't know, of Norbert. I said before, like, oh, what would a modern day Norbert say as someone who's like deeply aware of the different, like someone who can perceive the way technology is changing the affordances for people to be and experience stuff. And like he's kind of old man shaking his fist at, oh, like we gotta really be careful about this, because as soon as this happens, the genie's out of the bottle, and this is happening, and it's just putting a pressure on people. And I was like, at the same time, we're increasingly in a space where, on one end, we have so much potential that would never existed to be and experience stuff, but we're still trapped by certain limits too. And there's a lot of things you could say about that, and that's like exactly what I was awkwardly stating earlier, or trying to get at. It's like, yeah. I mean, I don't know. We're kind of at. I guess this was like only like 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 pages. I kind of did a big round of closing big picture ideas. I don't know if I have other like. What are your favorite chapter of the book? People want to say anything?
you want to say something, Amanda?
The book was kind of all over the place, but I liked that because it was still like I don't know, it was still cohesive. It was still like coming from one point of view, but it was really talked about a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. Sometimes he seemed to contradict himself, but there was like a truth in both, seemingly contradictory things he was saying. I liked that, and I guess this is mostly in the previous chapter. It took him a while, but he finally got to like the human use of human beings. And we talked about this a little bit last time. But how, machines can do X, Y, Z, but ultimately it's we're in charge. And it's when humans, use machines in a particular way that that's where the danger is. Like we are a necessary ingredient. I don't know. I don't have any like big concluding thoughts really. There are definitely some ideas that I want to get back to, because there are some that I think are just relevant to other discussion having, and things that like looking at more recent papers could actually be like interesting and fruitful.
Yeah. I appreciate sort of the zeitgeist of his views in terms of like what was a highbrow literary reference and critique at the time. I think that was kind of a fun side quest of this too. Yeah, I've said a lot. I mean, if you want to say anything, Bradley, about this, or just kind of
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, one of the reasons why I was interested in the book, and I think maybe how it fits into the cybernetics thrust that we're trying to achieve, is this idea of regulation, cybernetic regulation, and like, what is it that we can learn from this about? I mean, it's a dated view. I mean, people have worked on, like, we've talked about cybernetics going into control theory and going into other fields like neuroscience or into social science in different ways. But like, what is it that we can learn? And I kind of, in reading this book, I'm almost like critiquing the whole model of cybernetics. So like,
Yeah.
I'm thinking like, is it really true that, say, we have this that our goal should be a homeostatic world, and that everything that's anti-homeostatic is bad and everything that's homeostatic is good? I mean, it seems kind of like a value statement put on like something that we think of as like maybe a system of regulation. So I mean, we have ideas like that in folk psychology. Like, you have bad vibes or bad something and good something, or and it's like this thing that you can. It almost seems Monachian, as Norbert Wiener would put it, and that the one part, the light, is like the thing that's well regulated. The dark is the thing that's poorly regulated. But what does it mean to be one or the other? I mean, I think when you look at like a complex system, if you go to like dynamical systems theory or something like that, you find that there are a lot of intermediate states that when you're dealing with a system not of trivial complexity, that you have a lot of intermediate states, or you have a lot of states where you can't really determine whether something is good or bad. It's just kind of like, well, I have to evaluate it, maybe in different parts, or maybe there are different phases, or it really does. That metaphor really does wear thin, I think, in some ways.
And the metaphor of homeostatic stuff,
well, yeah, the idea between like homeostatic and anti-homeostatic. Homeostatic is being like the ideal, but we can't necessarily turn to that ideal in practice necessarily. So we have this problem with, maybe there's a language that needs to be, an intermediate language that needs to be developed that sort of thinks of this in terms of, first of all, if it's homeostatic, clearly, maybe it's well regulated. What does that mean? Does it mean that we can achieve like very tight feedback? Maybe there's systems that don't really involve tight feedback, and so by definition they can't be well regulated. Or if that's not really our goal, then maybe it's that it's coherent, that feedback keeps the system together and ordered. Okay, well then that's a different system than something that's tightly regulated and well regulated, or whatever you want to call it. Conversely, we have a lot of examples of systems that are far from equilibrium that are still in order. So we have, in complexity theory, people have talked about far from equilibrium systems, or systems on the edge of chaos, and that includes a lot of like complex systems that we know and love that are very complex but still orderly in some way. There's a regularity to them. Then there's like anti-homeostatic or chaotic, and the problem with like talking about complexity theory and bringing chaos into it is chaos also suffers from that deficit, where you talk about chaos and people think like they use the colloquial definition of chaos, which is it's horrible and we have to avoid chaos. But in fact, chaos in physics or in complexity theory is just a regime where things don't make sense. And then things can be on the edge of chaos and make sense. And they kind of include chaos, but chaos is really just a stand-in for that sort of stochastic process that we can't detect the regularities of. So in that game against nature, if we go back to that, we can't find the pattern. We can't lock onto that pattern, that regularity. And so we're going to lose that game against nature, because no matter how hard we try, we'll never be able to predict the whatever's going on in nature. So then, that by definition, to go back to cybernetics, we can't say that it's well regulated. In fact, we would think that it's poorly regulated. But, there's a lot more to it. We just need, I think, an intermediate language there. And we don't have it because cybernetics is splintered off into these different areas of application, and nobody necessarily cares about that. They care about maybe optimal control, or they care about embedding a system and talking about the self, or I don't know. I mean, just the language is not going to be developed the way it's being used now. So, and this is just my kind of what I've been thinking about the last several months. But I mean, this is something I think we can contribute to, because we have kind of a grasp on this, on cybernetics, bringing it into the present, but in that way that's conceptual, but also grounded in some sort of analysis. We could probably do this. I mean, I just don't know. If you wrote a paper and you proposed a terminology, probably would get ripped apart, but maybe in a good way.
No, I'm immensely grateful for everything you just said, because I talk about person studies stuff, but what you just said to me is the I don't know what to say. I think math maybe is I'll really use the word getting, there's sort of a math behind it. There's just systemically, I talk about models of people and emotions and whatever. There's a model of systems and language. I really appreciate and agree with, we need an intermediate language, right? Because there's not language for important things about this, particularly regarding nuance and intermediate states. And I'm 100% on board with that. And I think even you made a lot of really nice inroads to chaos, to systems on the edge of chaos, the sort of the different flows. There is well, I'll try to make this so I can read this later. Is there, and there is a space for all of these things, chaos, edge. There's not really a complete mapping or modeling of just the way things can, they're sort of discrete categorizations of systemic activity, but I think there's a space. But I think there's something there to this, and I'm, maybe this is what we talk about next or not, but I totally am on board with all that, and I feel that's a really cool. I didn't know this. I didn't know this. I didn't know this was kind of on your mind, but it makes sense, at least from when I disclose to people who may watch this in the future. I kind of came on board in the lab. The first thing I looked at was this cybernetics thing about EGRT with Rob Stone, and which never really came from it. I didn't know what to do with it. I kept thinking about cybernetics and this other stuff. So it's kind of cool to have this in the light of all that stuff that's happened since then is kind of a cool thing to think about. And I'm that's definitely something that I would like that to happen in the lab going forward. And I know, as Bradley said, yes, it would get torn apart. But I'm actually interested in working on it in spite of that, because I know if we brought that to embodied intelligence workshop, or if we actually tried to make it a little more rigorous and like complex systems, I'm sure is a conference I don't even know anything about, but I like going to people that study that and like how would I think it's the exciting thing about like how to anticipate and improve. Like a lot of the questions for like how we do that are fitting in with things kind of related to a lot of the deeper like mathematical structuring behind some of what I'm concerned about in my personal studies, terribly titled project, but like, how does dynamical systems fit with it? How does complexity, chaos, nonlinear dynamics, all those things that are like these fields of study that I like personally know about, but like what does cybernetics say with all those things fit? And then also making the space for like I do think there's something, and this is a speculative guess, and I'm not trying to say this is what Norbert means. I'm not saying it's my final views, but I feel like there's also sort of like a place for acknowledging purpose or intent or something about, I don't want to say, I'm not happy with the word faith, but some essence of what Norbert's trying to get at with all of these things about going against meaning. Like there's something about, I really like what Garley said about a little bit of the framing of like homeostatic is good and anti-homeostatic is bad, and a little bit, I don't know, doesn't feel quite right. But I think there's also something to like structuring of, I don't know. There's something in, I don't want to, I'm hesitant to put like a normative term of good or bad. Right? But it's sort of like there's an importance to systemic awareness. I don't know what to call it yet, but there's something about this that I want to say, and I don't know what it is yet. Anyway, I said a whole bunch. So
yeah, I think the normative aspect is maybe the problem. I mean, like when people talk about good versus bad, it implies that nature has sort of designs good versus bad, when in fact, like what we're talking about here has nothing to do with good versus bad. It's just kind of like, if something is anti-homeostatic, it's largely like just something that is suboptimal, or it's something that is not, doesn't make sense, or maybe isn't an affordance. There are ways that we can describe it that aren't normative that kind of get us farther, and don't confuse us. So that's another thing. Yeah, I mean, definitely the use of language. A lot of this is carried over from like pre-scientific times. People talk about things, and then they like kind of cast it in their minds as like, well, this has to be the way nature is, but we know that nature isn't really like going to punish us if we, people use that even like in the hardest core of sciences. People will use that as metaphors, and it's like they'll use it as like a writing device, and it's like, oh, come on now, like this is just making your job worse. Like, when you cast things in metaphors like that, it's like, well, people are gonna then say, well, yeah, that's the way nature works, and you're like, no, it doesn't work like that, but thanks for playing. So that, yeah, and I don't mean we need to make a whole new language or science. I think it's just like, and I don't know how much people care about the original cybernetic language, but like just to have like, just to think about some of these issues and say, if we took classical cybernetics and drove it forward from some of the things that they've been arguing, we might be able to come up with a good way, maybe like a conceptual framework, a set of methods to kind of interface between maybe like complexity theory and some of the systems that we talk about with respect to the brain, or with respect to society, or respect to biology, and just kind of, something that's maybe more systems oriented than standard statistical language, but maybe something that isn't quite like dynamical systems language, where it's kind of hard to see the connection between like the brain system, and then like complexity theory. So we've seen examples of that where they'll use the language of physics and they'll kind of impose it upon biology. They'll say this is an order parameter, and then you say what's an order parameter, and then well, we have to adapt that measure to the brain, and so it's kind of clunky in that way. Yeah, but yeah, definitely it's somewhat linguistic, but it's also conceptual too.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, I think we're coming to what's exciting about the future of this and many other things like cognition future stuff and kind of cybernetic stuff and person study stuff and things we've been looking at is like I feel like there's sort of I continue to see more and more that the landscape for actually doing some of this bigger conceptual work is here. Like I can see the landscape and I feel like I'm having a much stronger sense that so many other things just haven't really been tenable until now. Not even really that there can be a finished product now, but I think some of the things haven't been able to have the context necessary to really pursue until now, kind of now in quotes, but yeah. Anyway, we have like 9 minutes left. I know, bro, I said a lot, probably said a lot, Amanda said some things. And do you have anything you want to kind of say after all that, Amanda? I know covered a lot of ground there.
No, a lot to think about. The question of normativity is interesting because there's like a one of maybe the main project of philosophy has been trying to explain where normativity comes from. So it would be interesting, and some philosophers have tried to do this, to like, if we give this kind of glossary of terms and this language that would allow like communication across disciplines, what potential could that have for explaining like the normativity of human action? I don't know. It doesn't get more lofty than that project, but I agree that like we want to find terms that go beyond like the normative terms we're used to, but also connecting our concepts of good and bad, like better and worse, to things like optimal or suboptimal, like whatever language makes sense, then like that's interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about with all this stuff. In the few minutes we have left, there are a few administrative things to say. Kind of what's next? Kind of, is this timing good? Kind of, do people want to continue this? Do we want to change stuff? Amanda, this is kind of your brainchild baby, so I don't know what you are feeling about all that.
I think it would be cool to read a few papers. I have at least one of Michael Levin's papers in mind on memory that's explicitly connected to something Weiner says about like embodied memory. So there's at least one thing I'd love to read together. Maybe we play. I would also be okay with taking a break until after like the holidays, and then picking up on like these supplementary readings.
Which holidays? Like all of them into next year, or like any specific ones?
Yeah, like I don't know. Thanksgiving feels really close, and then all the others are, yeah. And so until next year,
Okay.
I don't feel the same way about Cognition Futures, but because this would be every other week anyway, so it would only be putting off a few meetings. It would be a good time to do it.
You're right. Yes. I don't necessarily want to go too excited about let's dip into some Levin stuff, but yes, I'm excited about potentially dipping into some Levin stuff regarding this specifically. But also, like, I think would you want to meet at all, like, next time, or do you want to, like, say this is a stopping point until next year? I'm not asking you pressure. I didn't understand.
I guess I do have like the one paper already in mind that I could easily find, so we could just do that 2 weeks from now and then break. I'm happy either way.
Okay. I'm a little bit inclined to do that just because I think that would be a nice. I'm kind of curious. I'm saying that because I feel like thinking ahead, like, into, like, I think this is kind of bridging into, like, what do we want to do in the lab in the next year, and that's kind of, I think, where the discussion leads me, because I have some things that I definitely want to do, and I have some things that really tie into. There's sort of like, there's definitely some Levin overlap for me in the future, and I'm particularly sensitive. Like, right now, I feel like, as a side note disclosure, I feel so, like, self-absorbed in the things that I want to do academically and research-wise, and I feel really like I don't want to overly have gravity or, like, pressure on people to go in a specific direction. So I feel like I like, and I feel a little bit blind to how much I'm doing that. So I want to say, like, people, please, like, rigorously state what you want or don't want, because I don't want to pull people certain ways. But, like, yeah, like, there's certain stuff about Levin, and I think I remember the paper you talked about, because I know we talked about it before. Like, I'm interested in, like, kind of reading that in the relatively near future, because I know there's other stuff I want to do down the road, and I want to kind of prepare. I want to have a real discussion about that too. But yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. So maybe we say we meet again in like 2 weeks and talk about that paper, and then that's it for this season. Does that sound okay? Or
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll find it and share it. I know I shared it in the Slack. I guess this reading group Slack channel is short, so it shouldn't be hard to find, but I'll try to share it again.
Okay, cool. That's good. It would be nice maybe if it'd be nice to do a little recap post on reading this, because I think all of our outtakes from, like, even if it's just summarizing this, which I would love to do, but I'm a little strapped for time. Like, maybe a very small, like, a very small blog post about this, that would be cool too. Which I can try to spearhead. With thoughts, and kind of I might interview you guys for your thoughts and tidy up what we just said here a little bit. We'll see. But yeah, for next time, that's great. Also, like, planting some seeds and thinking about that. Not really talking about it here, maybe more Saturday, but, like, I think I'm ready to, like, I don't know. There's some, like, bigger projects and that I have in mind, and I really want to hear what other people want to do. Like, I know Bradley's been talking about cybernetics for a while. I know, Amanda, you're interested in the phenomena, the neurophenomenology stuff and the other thing, and you have other agendas and things you want to do too. So I'm actually, I like us meeting to talk about these side things, and I really want to, like, make sure we'll benefit, we'll, like, find what's going to benefit them, and what can we do in the lab to make sure we're all kind of getting what we want out of it going forward. And I feel really aware of that because I have things that I know I want to do, and I just want to kind of reiterate that here. So that could be to be continued, but I'll leave it at that for now. And I think that's our time for today. So any other thoughts, or we can see each other this weekend, perhaps.
Yeah. See you on Saturday.
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds good. Sounds good.
Great. Thanks, everybody. This is great, and I'll see you next time.
That's it.
So, bye.